The Yakuza series, at this point, has a history behind it and is very much a long-running franchise. During its run, the series has adapted well to new technology and techniques throughout these generations. Biggest and best example of this is the adoption of the Dragon Engine, at least in my opinion. Technologies were not the only thing adopted, however, as business models of the games have also gone along with the industry, even if it wasn't exactly at a one-to-one pace. The most recent example of this is the mainline games, all being available on Xbox Game Pass and PlayStation Plus. Of course, before, the most sustained and popular business models for these games from the late 2000s all the way up to the end of the 2010s was DLC in its many forms. Certainly the mainline Yakuza games have had DLCs implemented in them throughout the series, but were they ever worth it? The DLCs present in these games certainly have not been a notable subject when analyzing these games, but since they have continued to be included with every entry, it might just be worth asking the question if RGG have done well enough in the implementations of DLC up until now. Let's start with the first game, again in the mainline series, that would be able to actually have DLC, Yakuza 3. Okay, quick caveat, I'm taking my experiences with the remastered collection on the PS4, which gives you all previous DLC of the PS3 versions of Yakuza 3, 4 and 5 for free, which does not change any of the items given. Also, where I mention DLC, I mean all downloadable content, not just the ones that dropped on the online stores, so pre-order bonuses and such will be included in the list. Again, mostly because they are bundled in with the remastered collection, as the modern business models have evolved since then. In Yakuza 3, DLC is accessible in Premium Adventure and New Game Plus. So basically once you finish the game once, it can be split into two categories of items and new gameplay. The items DLC consists of 16 packs of items, something you'll see is a trend in handing out DLC in these games. These packs escalate with the quality of items for each and every time you visit. It starts with some unbelievably easy to obtain healing items, a weapon and some gear, which give you a tiny buff. This remains consistently the case, only ever increasing the usefulness of the gear and weapon handed to you in each pack. Eventually, you'll start getting cheat items for the gambling games, which if you know how to use them right, can be an excellent way of increasing the money you have in a relatively short period of time. That's it really. You do start getting some rare crafting material for weapons and a bunch of more gambling items, but nothing you can't find in-game really, and certainly nothing worth paying for, again given the position in-game. Look, you make weapons and gear as valuable to you with your playstyle, but I would say they aren't treated as integral by the majority of players of the Yakuza series. Don't get me wrong, some items can be extremely game-changing for completions, like the Sacred Tree armor that blocks any bullets coming your way, or the other gear that fundamentally changes the game and the gameplay mechanics. But for the most part, these really are unique buffs and debuffs that can be done without, can be found in-game and are crucial enough, I would say, for money to be spent on them. My opinion is that if the paid DLC was just going to be a bunch of non-crucial items that could be found in game, then they should have given the players that spent money an abundance of other stuff like sacrifice stones, war god amulets, golden pistols, and the beads of good fortune. These items at least change up the game so significantly that I think they would justify the grind in-game needed to get them, or hypothetically an amount of money that would need to hypothetically buy them for hypothetically DLC. Oh, and I would let you access them whenever, hypothetically. The more substantial DLC addition is the new gameplay, represented by the X-Tiger House of Extras, accessible by a fortune teller woman in locations in both cities. If you ever wander around the remastered version and wonder why that's there, it's because they were for the DLC for the PS3 versions. First off, there is a sort of arcadey mode in here called Survival, where you start where else but Tenkaichi Gate at level 1 with a random weapon and a random recovery item, with bosses scattered in fixed locations throughout Kamurocho, with Mine in Theatre Square being your final challenge. The goal here is, obviously, to get enough XP to become powerful enough for this final challenge. Hamazaki is a new boss here that you can fight, which you can't do in the main game, and this is a fun, replayable challenge that definitely goes well with being DLC, since the only thing you earn from it is money. Again, this is only available in the post game. And it definitely has the replay over and over charm you tend to expect from challenge DLCs. Another challenge DLC that is here is the survival tag mode, which is bizarre to say the least, but it can essentially be boiled down into the following. You are Kiru and Kamurocho, defenseless, only able to sprint and tasked with heading to certain locations to perform simple tasks like making it there or viewing a location in first person. All the while you're being chased down by Bob, the Afroed clown, and sometimes even multiple Bobs joining in on the chase. It certainly is a wacky, goofy, and nice break from the main mechanics of the game, but it isn't much beyond that. The two other DLC modes are the Coliseum battles against bosses, and one is even a tag team with Majima. The other DLC adds more requests to Haruka's requests and thus more levels to it, if you are really feeling like wandering around a little bit longer in the post-game with a purpose. Oh yeah, I should mention the 2-player minigames were also DLC. I don't know how valuable that really is since I have never once clicked on that option in the many Yakuza games I have played. Okay, let me tell you, researching what the DLC for Yakuza 4 back in 2011 even was surprisingly difficult and sent me down many a rabbit hole that are just crazy. All I'm saying is, if you want to relive 2011 and what it was really like, just try and find all the Western trailers for Yakuza 4 and prepare to cringe. Anyway, let's start off with what I could concretely find were DLC, the 2 item packs. These packs are with Bob in the post-game and consist of 8 packs each. The first item packs are just called Item Pack 1 to 8 and suffers from the same problem as Yakuza 3, with it mostly being just recovery items, weapons and gear. Again, not crucial stuff yet. The S item packs 1 to 8 this time thankfully include top tier items that again can be found around in game, but at least it's more concise here and includes the extremely useful things for 100% completion, especially the get rich quick item, which is almost crucial for Pachinko. I'm not sure 100% if the S item packs were DLC, but given that they're under the extra modes tab in the main menu of the remastered collection, where all the other DLC is listed, I think it's an educated guess. Also in this tab are the costumes for the playable characters and Haruka, and a new rack for Haruka's requests, just like in Yakuza 3. There's another tab in the main menu called Special Games, and seem to include 3 special karaoke tracks: Raindrops, Pure Love and Kamarucho with Skinny Hana-chan this time, and I Want to Change Myself for Haruka, brought over from Yakuza 3, which was seemingly DLC according to my ventures on Games FAQ. The other special games is the 2-player minigames, just as it was in Yakuza 3. What really gets me wondering is the reports from various websites of a survival mode as DLC, which I could imagine is just like the one in Yakuza 3, and also an underground car park racing, which from what I can cobble together is just supposed to be chase missions but set in the underground parking lot. I can't find any footage going around, nor do I know where to look, so I guess this will remain a mystery to me going forward. Much easier to research, but also much wilder, is what I found for Yakuza 5. First of all the DLC is listed under the extra tab in the main menu of the remastered and includes costume changes, cheat items for the gambling games, and that being available in the post-game modes. Along with this is also a classic at this point, recovery items, gears, weapons that will all be available to you in the convenience store, which can help out Shinada, especially if you simply want to get going in his chapter. Of course, 2-player modes make a return here as well. It must have been a tradition at this point. That's not even the wild. What's wild is that apparently the side stories, which feel so fundamental to the game, or at least to 100% completion, were DLC for the original Japanese release, although it was included in the game's Western 2015 release for free. The least they could do for making us wait so long. These side stories all have their own in-depth gameplay mechanics, unique art assets, and storyline to boot, culminating in a compelling character studies and overall fun storylines to follow along with. I'm just shocked that they were DLC, given the ramp up in quality from like survival mode and tag. Yakuza 0 took a turn in DLC as all releases were free and were all sent out after the game had been released. The Citrix Z guide I always use said for 0, by the time you read this, all the DLCs will be available, so there's no point in going over the timed release of them. So I assume that the DLC were staggered releases. I also stumbled to the fact that the PS3 version, which was exclusive to Japan, had some DLC that you have a Walkman in-game, but the only real way to get it was to buy an album in Japan with the 80 songs of Yakuza 0. So it isn't really relevant, just wildly interesting. The additions added were again the useful keying items, some gear, some weapons, some that were unique, some parts for Pocket Circuit, and outfits depicting characters that at this point had their own storied histories behind them, with 5 games in their arsenal. The outfits once again were locked behind the post-game. Yakuza Kiwami, in the tradition of borrowing from its closest brother 0, also had staggered releases of free DLC with outfits, again locked behind the post-game. Recovery items, weapons, and items were also added. Not much to say here, but I guess it really was to be expected, as RGG were looking to release Yakuza 6 in their big jump to the Dragon Engine in the same exact year of 2016. With the move to the Dragon Engine, Yakuza 6 completed the transition by offering the staggered free DLC as well as offering paid DLC specifically for their flagship minigame of the game. The free DLCs included XPs and outfits, with outfits only being available in Premium Adventure, and includes Onomichio, which I think is worth a mention on its own. This is also the first of the game's that is easiest to do research on since it isn't available as a remake or remaster at the time of writing, so the DLC is still on sale for the various platforms it has been released on. The paid releases were basically instant win cards for the game's flagship clan creator RTS minigame. However, there's an option to enter codes that I'm sure you've seen in the mode as well that were given away outside of the game and give you really good characters and are available on the Series Z guide, so I would check them out first. But I also don't think around 88 Rand is too much to pay for such great cards that are selling as DLC for a minigame that I think is insanely well done. Kiwami 2 follows in Yakuza 6 footsteps, almost exactly, except this time it allows you to buy the pre-order bonuses from the various shops. I mean, it's been long enough since release, right? This means that one of the outfits, the comedian outfits, is the first paid DLC outfit so far. The rest of the paid DLC is the rest of the pre-order bonuses like EX boosts, cash injections, EXP for the clan creator, hostesses for the other in-depth minigame, the hostess club manager, and unique weapons. Along with that, the DLC available to purchase is the Creator Clan's RTS bundle, which is a sequel to the one from 6, now that you're playing a defensive RTS as opposed to the offensive one before. The DLC cards for the Creator Clan is basically the same concept here as giving you access to the fan favorites that are top tier and will give you a way easier time in the minigame itself. Of course, there was a staggered release of free content as well, giving access to outfits, weapons, hostesses, and boosts for the two main minigames. They really are appreciated here for being free, and I do like they finally cut the fat of recovery items being included here. Judgment, I certainly would mark as RGG's first true steps into the most recent modern era of Yakuza games, which I suppose was easy enough to do given how they wrapped up things so nicely in Yakuza 6. Not only did they manage to take the games in new directions, but the DLC really started to actually feel sort of well integrated into the entirety of the overall game. First, let's discuss what they put out for free in the first month of the game's release. I should note I picked up this game on the PS5, so I had all the DLCs come with the game now. However, if you head over to the DLC on the PS Store, obviously for the PS4 version, you will notice that they've bundled all the previous packs that were sold together in one DLC that contains everything. I actually like how they staggered the release of the free stuff. Each pack was themed and would generally help players, especially if this was their first experience with the Yakuza game, at assumed points in time that would have lined up when they dropped. It started out with baby healing items earlier, then it moved on to drone racing parts, then crafting materials and extracts, and so on, all on a release schedule that I imagine would feel natural if you were progressing in the game at a standard pace, or just really sinking your time into the side activities after having the game for a while. I imagine then the materials would really have helped you out. So big thumbs up on mostly the timing and generosity of the free stuff. Now let's move on to the paid DLC. Much like the free ones, they come in packs that again used to be sold separately. I really like the fun pack that gives players who really wanted to decorate their bases for the first real time in these games a bunch more to work with here, as well as letting them explore more of this outside with photo mode filters. In the same vein, it's why I like the girlfriend pack. Getting to once again customize the outfits for the ladies Kamurocho makes a return here in Judgment once you have the DLC, and you can even dress up Shirasaki sensei and have her come along with you again in the post game. The play pack gives really unique and interesting cosmetics to the drone racer mode, as well as giving you the additional free play passes before you got the free play pass in game, which is really super useful early on in the game, as Dice and Cube, which the play passes are used for, is a really great way to rack up some money and fast. Luckily, the game is decently enough balanced around this fact. Now, the biggest part of the paid DLC, and the aspect that essentially replaced weapons for this games, was the extracts and the DLC's special infinite use extracts that went way above and beyond the other extracts in-game. This was by far the coolest DLC and could help you make easy work of the game, even if it was somewhat balanced with its cooldowns. I mean, regenerating health, regenerating EX gauge, fire and lightning punches, and just one called instant kill. This is all officially insane additions to the game, but they're super fun and they keep replays and late games feeling super interesting. Overall, I think Judgment sets a path that I would like to see the other games follow, with a mix of helpful staggered releases, items that let the players express themselves, and off-the-wall additions to gameplay that totally change the dynamic of the game without interfering with the mechanics too much. Like a Dragon took the series in new directions in many ways, while still staying true to the core roots of the series. Unfortunately, this blend of old and new would mix in some of the best and worst ways with the DLC. Context first, the game came out in Japan first and would be the last game in the series, as far as we know going forward, to not launch simultaneously in Japan and worldwide. So a lot of implementations of DLC would simply only affect the Japanese players. Firstly, there was the controversy with the New Game Plus, which for some inexplicable reason was not in the base game at launch. Maybe the switch to the new RPG style gave RGG the idea that they could get away with it, but ultimately there was backlash. Anyway, the New Game Plus would eventually be added back in, but not before they tried to charge you for it. I don't know exactly how that went, but it seems as if they reversed that decision, at least for the Western release, since no one ever talks about it anymore. Oh, one weird thing about the delayed release is that the ultimate hardcore true Final Millennium Tower dungeon that you could do as the final challenge was added later in the Japanese version, but before the Western version. So they put it in the Western version and even tied a trophy to it, and thus the platinum as well. Which is a wild way to think about it, having gone through the game myself, only to find out about this a year later. Again, the PS5 version I played had all the free DLC baked in to the game, so it felt like it was all natural to me. So it's kind of ever feels sad that it was ever gatekept. In terms of the paid DLC, which is much easier to research since it's still up, I would say it's much better. The stats boosts and crafting materials make way more sense in this game than they ever have in this series, since gear, weapons, and items are actually core aspects to Ichi and all the party members, with all their levels, their jobs, their ranks, and their weapons, and all the resources needed going further in the game. In that same vein, and keeping up with the Dragon Engine games DLCs, you can also buy an absolutely game-breaking form of DLC for the minigame. This time it's a business management, and in keeping with tradition, they all represent classic characters from the series before. Another aspect of the paid DLC is the new costume packs. I don't mind the costumes. There's a decent mix of character switches and new outfits that are related to the story while still being unique. It really doesn't interfere with already excellent costumes in the game, and I have some positive opinions about the overall designs. The next DLC I have great positive opinions on is the extra jobs you can buy. An extra skill set that you can add at any time is wonderful and might just have been RGG's next breakthrough with their DLCs. Thanks to the already abundance of jobs in the base game, adding one more doesn't interfere with the scaling too drastically, and everything is 100% doable without the jobs, and I can personally attest to that. The one place where the DLC absolutely sucks when it's paid is the karaoke pack. The karaoke songs do not appear in the minigame for the karaoke, simply they appear as CDs for the Survive Bar's jukebox. To be fair, the idea in general is bad. I mean, the Survive Bar jukebox is nice, and being able to play other Sega soundtracks in this game is very nice itself, but since it's only available in that bar while doing nothing, it's not very engaging. I would have been lukewarm on the idea of the DLC if it added generally every other karaoke song in the Yakuza franchise to the CD player and you can listen to them. But since it doesn't exactly do that and excludes the opportunity to add for money some of the classic karaoke songs that are missing here, I just think it was done fairly terribly and should be way cheaper than it is, if not free, a couple months down the line. Lost Judgment is the latest game out at the time of writing, and I'm happy to say I think they almost nailed it this time. So much so that I would even say their model of having all the DLC released via a season pass, as well as the ultimate editions and stuff they had for the game when it released, wasn't actually that bad. First off, the headline addition to the DLC is obviously the excellent Kaito files, with this being their first real expansion since the Majima files that came with Kiwami 2. The Kaito files is 100% worth the price of admission, especially given all the other DLC in the games we've just covered. I've already covered the files before on my channel, but I will give my recommendations regardless by saying that it is pretty much a mini adventure of the main story as well, and it covers all the main aspects that round out these games, including the main stories, sub-stories, secret boss, fighting styles, gears, companions, minigames, exploration, etc. The next DLC for the base Lost Judgment introduces more girlfriends to our detective friends, which I have to say is a much better and interesting way of doing multiple girlfriends in one game. At least Yagami doesn't have to cheat in the base game, and you're simply choosing to add more with your own cash here. The additions to the school stories is the next DLC, and is done well by simply expanding the mini-games of the substantial school activities without affecting the ambition and interconnectedness of the plot of the school stories in general. It's great to have more robot parts, dance costumes, bike courses, and to be able to face off in the ring of the box scene with familiar faces. Like I said in Yakuza 7's part, adding a new style of combat to complement the multiple styles already in-game is a genius way to go around and add DLC, and the boxer style fits that mold perfectly. By the way, it's such a creative way to reuse mechanics you've already got in the game. If you're any good at the Master System games, the extra ones coming with the DLC might be great for you. It's kind of crazy to think that the full-fledged releases back in the day are just a small part of games today. Can't wait until 2050 where the entire series of the Yakuza games are going to be mini-games for you and your protagonist to play. With the extra DLC, the cosmetic changes are also really well thought out, especially the ability to change the detective dog Rompo's colors. He is the best boy. The extra skins for your skateboards, which is actually better because it changes your skateboard into a hoverboard, and your drone are well thought out and is a nice little touch to the game. The final DLC of Amon being added to the gauntlet so you can face him without needing to hold him safe is so refreshing. And the new extracts following the DLC's Footsteps of Judgment, its predecessor, are exactly what you expect. They are wacky, overpowered, and fantastically fun to use. I don't know, I just love it when you get to turn Yakuza into Star Wars. Ultimately, it seems as if the positive DLC practices RTG introduced with the Dragon Engine games and have been using and fine-tuning ever since are getting better and better, especially as they tune them to aspects that really, in my opinion, matter. Of course, the deserved backlash from fans for some of the DLC they've done in the past, most notably with Yakuza 7, also seems to be keeping them somewhat on the right path. And if they can continue down that path and give us something similar, and in fact even more fine-tuned in Yakuza 8, then the value is only going to be even more worth it. So, much like the rest of the series, the DLC has evolved for the better over time, especially if you consider its humble beginnings. Obviously, myself having access to all these DLCs for free, thanks to my more advanced versions of the games I picked up, helped me appreciate them more. However, the latest DLCs have been more and more worth it, and I would say that in stronger terms. While I still don't think the entire season pass is worth it for the latest game, Last Judgment, I wouldn't recommend against any of the DLCs separately, and would actively actually encourage picking up with the Kaiser files, which I think shows a great sign for the future. So to answer the question, the DLCs have gone from bad to okay to good to actively worth it in separate chunks. Over the long period the DLC has been available for these games, and who knows, maybe in only 1 or 2 more games the DLCs will be just as quality in all aspects as the main game themselves.